Great. So we will make a start. Hello, welcome to this webinar. Good evening, good afternoon, and good morning, depending on where in the world you're joining from. This webinar is around test automation strategy, everything you need to know. My name is Ian Ryan, and as a virtuoso maestro, it is incumbent upon me to lead you through the next 30 minutes. I will be amply aided and abated by my partner in test, a man whose skill is only surpassed by his inability to take a cue. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Ryan Thornton will be leading the technical discussion today. Ryan has decades-long experience working with many different tools in the testing space. Brevity is our close and personal friend, so let's jump to the agenda. Please note this webinar is being recorded, and feel free to be interactive and ask any questions when you see fit. We're going to start off with some introductions, which we've already completed. We're then going to jump to managing expectations, getting a strategy, deciding on objectives, managing risks, test data, environments, some good news, and last but not least, an opportunity to ask questions at the end if you're too shy to interrupt Ryan or myself. So without further ado, Brian, I'll hand it over to you.
I'm very pleased that an adieu wasn't furthered there. Thank you, Ian. Mr. Ryan, while I'm only Ryan, which is infuriating. So, in a break from the norm, when it comes to thought leadership webinars, we will actually be doing some thought leadership. It's not going to be a sales pitch for a tool. We're going to try and keep this pretty tool agnostic for the most part. We offer a very powerful tool, but like Chat GTP and the other ones that are out there, and the swathes of marketing that are being done on them, you don't always need to believe the hype. And I'm not being disparaging about any of these tools, by the way. I'm just saying that teams are still very much in the driving seat. Tools do not constitute a magic wand. There is no enchantment testy armor spell that will fix all your testing challenges. Time and thought needs to be put into their implementation. And that's where we're going to focus on in this talk. And one of my favorite quotes from Grady Booch of Unified Modeling Language fame put it: "A fool with a tool is still a fool." I intend to show how people and processes must be at the center of what we do when thinking about implementing test automation. Which brings us on to our next slide, managing expectations. I've worked as a product marketer, and I'm probably to blame for some of the misconceptions about automation. We've covered it a little bit in the last slide, but there's the thought that it'll somehow remove the need for testers, or that by simply pressing a button you will have a yes/no answer to the question, are you ready to release? But in reality, this is it's never, I was going to say rarely the truth, but never the truth. And a high number of test automation projects fail to properly get off the ground because of misaligned expectations. They end up spending 2 or 3 months only to find that the reality does not meet those expectations. So it's best to think about those expectations and get all the stakeholders involved to understand them. Now, that is not to say that automation is not a tool that, given the right level of priority and investment, can and does return significant rewards, be it test coverage, overall quality of the application, or indeed return on investment. But you have to be realistic with your goals and ensure that the business is committed to the ongoing investment that is needed to have a robust and successful test automation solution. There is some good news at the end where we kind of show what kind of ROI you can expect by taking a more thoughtful approach. Get a strategy. That may seem a little bit obvious and silly for a talk on test automation strategies. It is very obvious, but so much so that it almost needs to be mentioned, because the number of times I've seen automation implementation fail due to a lack of a well thought through strategy, and that's not to say it has to be chapter and verse, means it's worthy of inclusion. You know, get the easy stuff right. The first step, as with so many things, probably everything, in my opinion, but it's just my opinion, is to ask yourself a question, and that is, what is the objection of automation adoption? What do you want to achieve? What will a successful implementation look like? And as I said just previously, it doesn't need to be chapter and verse on everything you will do in your automation efforts. It's format. It's up to you. It's whatever you find, whatever a team finds meaningful is going to be more useful. A mind map, a document, a slide deck are all the same. It should, however, consider what the business wants to achieve. We will have a little look at that in the next slide, so I won't dwell on it too much. Risk assessment. What areas of application are the riskiest and need to be tested? Again, we'll go through these in more detail. Test data. Ensure you have the correct testable data. Environments. A test environment that's sufficiently stability and performance. Your SDLC setup. How does it all fit in? How will automation integrate with how you currently deliver software? You know, if to take an extreme example, if you're thinking of putting in CI/CD, but your software delivery is currently working in waterfall, you know, there's going to be a disconnect there. And then efficiency. Is automating a 30-second manual test an efficient use of resources? Possibly, probably not. And we will look, as I say, at each of these in isolation in a little bit more detail. Please also remember, when I'm going through each of these things, I realize we don't live in a perfect world, and different organizations have different structures, and some of these things, be it test data or environments, it might simply not be possible. And often the reasons why people you know, it's not that they don't consider them, it's that they have like problems or certain ways of doing things that don't always fit in. So it's about trying to get the best with what you've got. I'm going to paint a picture here of the perfect situation, but that's not to say that I'm not more than well aware that the perfect situation doesn't exist. I should probably crack on here. So as I said, we've come back to each of these. So we're looking at what the business wants to achieve, driving up quality standards to meet business goals. So we're asking ourselves, what are the objectives? You need to resist the urge to put pen to paper to create a strategy document until you've answered that question. More often than not, it can be reducing business risk through test automation. There are other reasons for adoption. It may be that you simply don't have the resources and time for manual testing. So ensure that you understand why you're doing this. And once that objective has been ascertained, you should move on to creating that document. This document should be a high-level document that defines the testing standards and test approach to be adopted and taken to deliver your objective, e.g., for the example we've used here earlier, ensuring risk to business is minimized. And with our experience, whenever we've looked at putting kind of a strategy in for any of our clients, we follow the KISS mantra: keep it simple, easy to follow, and to the point. You want to look at the scope and objectives, the business issues, roles and responsibilities, communication and status reporting, test deliverables, industry standards to follow. There may be some that you need to ensure for you to be compliant. which tools you want to use. Obviously, we'd like you to use Virtuoso. Look at the metrics, the risk and mitigation, defect reporting and tracking. How are you going to, lovely that all the tests have failed and you know that there's a bug, but what are you going to do now? Obviously, that's not lovely. Changing configuration management and a training plan to make sure everybody is on board. But again, not every team is built the same. Not every organization is built the same. Keep this relevant to your business and something people can use. We've seen a lot of test strategies that have been written just to tick a box and never see the light of day again. Better to get a few bullet points down that cover what was spoken about in the previous slide, that are easily understood and applied, than a 50-page romantic novel of detail that people will never read. Again, KISS. So then we look at risk, kind of a staple of continuous testing, to use one of the fancy post-agile, post-mature agile with a beard phrases. But it should be, one of the key outcomes should be that you're understanding the levels of risk faster. Is it safe to release is what you want to kind of come up with, or what is the risk associated with releasing, should I say. It is important to remember this when building. Tests that cover the most critical part of the application should be robust and concise and deliver feedback in a short period of time. It may require different types of testing for different phases of testing. So, for example, if you take a new feature, you may have more E2E tests that cover integration tests. Sorry, I'll start that again. If you take a new feature, tests may consist of a number of very short specific tests that may use API calls to bypass parts of the user flow. Or in later environments, you may have more E2E tests to cover integrations and the full user flow. And you want to keep each of these unique. Now, if we take a look at the example for kind of associating risk, this is an incredible oversimplification. So please don't hang me out to dry for oversimplifying. So before release, we run 3 test cases that validate the following 3 assertions. Make a purchase, that the purchase is made on screen. Dispatch order, that the dispatch notification is sent to the warehouse. Email invoice to the customer, that the customer receives an invoice by email. 2 of them pass and 1 fails. Or 66% of test cases have passed. This may meet the threshold for release. But if we attach risk, you can look at this differently. So making a purchase, that's really important. Dispatching the order, that's pretty important. Emailing or invoicing the customer, it's probably not going to make customer success or customer support very happy that this isn't happening and that they've got more work to do, but it's certainly not as risky as the other 2. So here, if one of the tests fails, you could have anywhere between 10 and 90% risk coverage. So understanding what are the most critical business risks to an application when thinking about what to automate is very important at the strategy level. Okay, first of 2 of the all-time favorites, the 2 horsemen of the test automation apocalypse. I've been working with web and blog posts and webinars, etc., for a number of years, and for all of them, the biggest problem in test automation is test data and environments. So let's have a look firstly at test data. We all know, most know this, and yet it still persists as the major culprit for preventing running test automation at scale. Knowing this is one thing. I suppose what we're wanting to see is how to avoid it. And it's key really here to have full control over any test data that you need for automation. Ideally, you should be able to generate, validate, and delete test data as needed, and preferably to automate in an automated manner. As a rule of thumb, if you've got a lot of if and thens in your tests, it probably means you've got a test data problem rather than any other problem, and you've been trying to overcome that problem by making your tests more complicated than they need to be. Tests really want to be dumb and simplistic, and getting a good handle on test data early is how you're going to avoid kind of that over complexity and show that you've got that you've got those dumb tests. And you need to give some thought to the volume of test data you'll need. You can, with most platforms, as included, you can test in parallel. That means depending on your application and test being executed, you may need quite a lot of data for each test. You know, an example, take an application where a user logs in, performs some actions linked to that user account. If all your tests logged with the same user, you may find that your tests collide and the actions from one test then impact or break another, or just something as simple as your application does not allow multiple loggings on the same user. So this will give you greater control over the UI and allow for more simplistic, robust tests. It will also ensure you're GDPR compliant. Oh, it will go some way towards that in terms of your testing. Test environments often don't have the same security that you would associate with your production environment. So by keeping dummy test data or synthetic data or whatever kind of data you want to get there, that's test data, you're going to be improving the security overall. Finally, test data is now joined by its partner in crime and the usual suspects for problems with test automation adoption. If you want to succeed, the main considerations for environments are stability and performance. From a stability perspective, you need an environment that is dedicated to automation and preferably controlled by the QA. Again, doesn't have to be. It may be that the product team are doing testing. We've seen a lot of that. One of the three amigos taking on the testing, but in that sense, they're operating as the QA. So again, not everything's set in stone here. It's got to be done when and where meaningful in a meaningful way. But you do need someone being the gatekeepers of that environment, as they should know exactly what and when something is pushed to the environment. And ideally, automation should be run before any changes are made to rule out any certainty of failed tests. And then, like, we're looking at performance-wise, you have to remember that running automation is really resource heavy in comparison to manual testing. And the environment and supporting services need to cope with running parallel tests. It's obviously going to vary quite a bit, but for most, it's best to have resources that can cope with 30 to 50 parallel users. Again, this is something that you need to kind of think about and consider. So to automate or not to automate, that is the question. And with traditional coded automation frameworks, this is a more poignant question when compared to faster, low code, no code alternatives. But nonetheless, it's still a question you should ask yourself before attempting to automate everything. I know that there's the kind of classic 80-20 split, or 70-30, I've seen some people say. But test automation is best suited to stable, repeatable, predictable tests. But you should also look to automate the following. Tests that take a considerable time to execute manually. So it's taking forever to do it manually, then this is great for automation. If it takes 3 seconds to do manually, is it worth the hassle of creating an automated test for it? Probably not. And these are also at risk of human error. Any tests that iterate through large data sets and high frequency repetitive tests. And then finally, kind of with that risk bit that we've talked about, the critical user flows, these need to be, these are a business critical risk. Let's get them automated. I'm looking at the time constantly because I do have a propensity for verbosity, but I think I'm about on time. So by getting a strategy, there is a lot to gain. There is some good news here. You maximize the chances of success. You're going to speed up testing, increase quality, probably increase coverage, and you're going to maximize the ROI. We've all seen the ROI calculations on test automation, both in terms of the speed and scale, but equally finding bugs earlier and how much cheaper it is to find a bug before production than it is in production, not to mention the loss of reputation. But I do feel an example is coming along. So I did say it wasn't a sales pitch. We have to get one slide in to do something like that. Though this is more, I think, to validate through one of our customers, Macmillan Learning. They were 100% manual. They couldn't keep up. This case study is available on the website, but they were very thoughtful. They really worked. We worked very hard together to come up with a strong strategy and 3 sprints, and we were getting, a very high percentage of the regression packs automated. It resulted in a 88% reduction in automation time. The numbers are too good to be true, but they are. 82% reduction in execution time from 2.75 hours to 30 minutes. That reduction in automation time is the authoring. 4 hours, the amount of time iClicker's regression suite takes reduced from 3 days. And the testing team, I think it's about 2 to 3 months, have got complete autonomy over tests and their maintenance. Now, I appreciate that is a whirlwind tour of test strategy, and many times an oversimplification, and at other times not necessarily applicable to everybody because we live in a real world. But that's certainly useful. It is taken from an ebook, which you can download from the website virtuoso.qa, was written by myself and David Ross, who's been a tester for more years than I'm sure he cares to remember. Which brings us, don't know if we've got any in the question and answer panel, to any questions that anybody may have. And if we don't have any, I've either covered everything or bored everybody to sleep. I think it's over to you to wrap up there, Ian.
Yeah, sure. No worries. And look, just in case anybody is having any issues with their audio, feel free to reach out to us directly. If there's a specific use case, or if you're just overwhelmed with information and you don't know where to start, feel free to reach out to us at Virtuoso. We're happy to give you some guidance and help you on your way. Brilliant. So with that, right, I think we'll wrap up for today, and hope to hear from you guys soon.
I've got a question coming. So do we see Virtuoso changing the test automation strategy? Yes. However, yes. So the speed at which one can automate and the ease at which one can author tests and maintain tests does mean that it's faster. A lot of the areas that we have talked about, such as environments and data, there are other tools as well. We have some specific features and capabilities that address those. However, fundamentally, you still need to consider the strategy in these areas and how your people and processes are going to leverage Virtuoso. So that's a bit of a sitting on the fence answer, but I think it's an accurate one. So it means that you can probably do more faster, but if you consider everything that we've discussed, you will do even more, even faster, and have much more success. Sorry to cut across you there, but I was just disappointed we didn't have a question and we got one.
And normally one starts a few, so we do have a couple of more minutes left. If anybody has anything else they'd like to ask, it's a good opportunity. And if not, as I said, you can reach out to us directly. Happy to look at your specific use case, team sizes, and help you guys maximize your efficiency.
Brilliant. Good. Ciao, ciao from me. Thank you.
Take care, guys. Bye-bye.